Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Dynasty Junkies podcast. This is episode 102, talking consistency tonight with our guest we'll get into in a minute. But before we do that, this is Andrew Hall on the mic at Andrew Hall FF. Co-hosting with me tonight is Scott Sidlow. How are you tonight, Scott?
What's up, Andrew? We are just firing away here into the Listener League 2. We are currently in the startup draft. We are at the end of the fourth round. Rocky and I have 3 picks coming up here. So depending on how this goes, maybe Rocky will be drinking tonight on vacation and I can make these picks or, talk him into something. So yeah, just looking forward to that, man. And obviously tonight we've got one of the OGs. So it's going to be a good one.
That's right. So without even further ado, I mean, we could sit around all day, but let's get talking to Bob Lung, who is our guest tonight. How are you doing tonight, Bob?
Doing great. Thank you for having me. First time on the show. Long-time listener, first-time caller kind of thing. Is that what
No, we appreciate that. I know you do a lot with consistency. Like I said before, we're going to get into some consistency stuff. You do a lot of great stuff for the whole fantasy community at a whole, and everything that you do is just, I love paying attention to what you're up to. And I know I've gotten to meet you a couple times. I'm in the league with you now at the OHFF and everything. Cool. So that was a fun draft back in May.
Trying to get Ocho Cinco to come to the Expo.
We're going to get it, man. We're going to keep tweeting at him until he does it. Maybe not this year. We're getting close, but I got a feeling at some point we'll break him down and get him to bring his cigars to the Expo. But actually, that's a perfect intro, I guess. What is the Expo? For those of people that are listening that may not be familiar with the Fantasy Expo, why don't you give us a quick, high-level intro and explain what that is all about?
It's hard to describe because there's nothing like it, right? I mean, just think if 500 to 600 of your closest friends all got together in Canton, Ohio for the weekend and partied Friday night, Saturday night, did drafts all day Saturday, played cornhole, played flag football, did some quarterback skills challenge, and then, oh, by the way, on Sunday, did an all-day Expo trade show booth type with 50 different websites and have about 14 panel discussions on every topic you can think of. That's what the Expo is.
That's a good time. That sounds like a great time. Are you kidding me? Like,
exactly
that sounds perfect.
You think it is. So if you ever wanted to do a road trip with your fantasy football buddies and you never knew where to go, or if you always wanted to go to the Hall of Fame, definitely come check it out. It's the weekend of August 12th through the 14th. So it's the second weekend of exhibition season. Probably before your draft, it should be anyway. And you can come and meet so many great people. Some of the best in the fantasy community will be there. Andy Behrens from Yahoo, Dave Richards, CBS, Brad Evans, Jeff Ratcliffe, Jeff Mans isn't going to make it. Sadly is getting ill again. John Hansen from Fantasy Points, Howard Bender from Fantasy Alarm. If you listen to Fantasy Sports Radio, basically everybody that you hear on there that does football will be at this event.
Yeah, and I know the Sunday part is a lot of fun too. You kind of see all the different booths and you get to meet a bunch of people. And I know when I went last year, I mean, even with the COVID restrictions and everybody wearing masks, it was great to still see people. You're like, oh, I know that face. I know those eyes. Like, oh, that's kind of fun.
Or at least you know their Twitter name, right? You were like,
yeah.
I don't know who you are. Oh, wait a minute. You're FF whatever. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. You're funny. I like you.
Yeah. I got to meet FF Man Bun. Yeah, exactly. Like J Mike, you know what I mean? Like got to meet a bunch of those guys. Obviously met J Mike at our draft too. So Expo is a great time. And I think you put it perfectly. I know you've said this before, but it's not for people it's not content creators. It's for fans. It's for normal folk. It's for people that want to interact with the community. And I think that's something that maybe gets lost a little bit on fantasy Twitter, where everybody's excited to meet each other. But there are tons of fans that go to this that have no content at all. They just come and absorb it.
And I've said this too, when people were talking about, it's mostly content creators net. I'm like, no, you don't get it. We're all fans.
Right.
Okay. I've been a subscriber to Football Guys for 20 years. I'm a huge fan of them. So for Joe Bryant and all the guys from Football Guys to be there, I've subscribed to Fantasy Alarm. I've bought, magazines from various sites. We're all fans because we all have, we have our niche. You guys have a dynasty niche. I have a consistency niche. But guess what? I don't know crap about dynasty, and yet I still play in all these damn leagues. So I'm usually asking Andrew, hey, what would you do this trade? Because I'm not sure. I don't do IDP, so I've got the guys at IDP guys and Nate Cheatham, and it's just we're all fans. And now that there's so many of us that have gotten the right idea and got into niches and be the best at the niches, now that's the way to do it, because now we rely on each other as fans and as content creators of our own. So we're all fans. All 600 people are going to be fans of whoever, and we're all in awe when we meet new people, or people we've looked up to for years, have followed and enjoy on Twitter. And the best part is, you know what? It's not like Twitter. There's no fighting. There's no bickering. There's no beating down somebody for their takes. We all argue and and enjoy each other's company and have a drink, and and you can
drinks.
hate one guy and I can love him, and we can still have a drink together and get along. And it's not Twitter. So a lot of people are like, oh, Twitter is so violent and
right.
and arrogant and downgrading, and I don't want to go with a bunch of people like that. Guess what? Those people don't come to these events.
That's a great point. And honestly, too, it's hard to be mean when you're face to face, right?
Yeah.
So I
you got a drink
Twitter,
in your hand. It's like, come on.
Yeah. Twitter is different because
warriors.
it's keyboard warriors. Yeah, you got these people just yelling out takes and being mean to each other. When you're face to face with someone, it's a lot harder to be mean. So it's actually the best part of Twitter. It's where you can actually interact with each other. Everybody, for the most part, when I was there, was very respectful, very commutable about everything. So it was such a good time. I'm really excited to go back. I know that I went last year. I drove up Saturday morning, stayed the night, stayed Sunday, and left. This time I'm coming down Friday after work. I'm coming down Friday night. Cool. I know there's a bunch of things going on Friday night and Saturday, and we'll hear more about that as we get closer and ramp up. But I'm just excited to be there and, like I said, interact with everybody. I forget, Scott, are you able to make it this year?
2 kids under 2, no chance.
It was kind of a joke. I mean, it's not going to happen yet. I know you're not there yet, Scott. You're not there yet. That's okay.
Hey, Scott. So look, Scott, a couple of years, they're going to have a water park, an amusement park, all at the village. So you can bring the wife and kids,
family.
They can go enjoy their time. You can do fantasy football. It's going to be perfect. So
beautiful. Just looking forward to
a couple more years, buddy. Right out the door.
I'll hang in.
Speaking of Canton, I feel like we can pivot this. I'm wearing my new shirt. I know Bob's got a Canton shirt on too. For those of you watching,
and I've got that shirt already. I've got the new one.
This is a classic. I'm drafting from Canton, the Scott Fishbowl 12 shirt that I got.
Canton, Ohio.
Drafting from beautiful Canton, Ohio. I know Bob's a big advocate. But I'm looking at it like I get to draft from the Hall of Fame. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I get to actually go into the Hall of Fame and draft in a room like we were talking about in our group today for the Canton drafters. Awesome. There's going to be 3 groups of us that are drafting Scott Fishbowl teams live for a couple of hours on Saturday, July 9th is I think when we're doing that.
Yeah, a week from
anyone who's
tomorrow.
in Scott.
Saturday.
This 2 weeks from 2. A week from this Saturday, which is just nuts to me. That it's so close. But anybody who's already in Scott Fishbowl and is near Canton and wants to come draft live, please do come on down. I think it's going to be a fun time. Obviously, Bob and I will be there. A bunch of other people, fans, content creators alike. There's a bunch of good people that are going to be in that. So I always like to mention that too. Just if you aren't in Scott Fishbowl, there are still a fair amount of slots coming out. He's still got about 400 or 500 names to drop. So you're not out of it. I actually had a buddy of mine that was like, oh, it's too late. I didn't bother registering. I guess I'll be in next year. I'm like, why not put your name in now? What's it hurt? You never know.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys saw the video podcast that we just did with Dave Klug with Scott and I maybe a week ago.
I haven't seen that yet.
And I got to tell you guys this because you may not have heard this. And Scott isn't keeping it a secret, but he doesn't like to put it out there. Because I said to him, I go, just for fun, I said, how many people are signed up, have officially filled out a form and have signed up to be in the Scott Fishbowl? I go, and he goes, well, we're going from 1,900 to 3,000 this year. Total people. Do you guys want to take a guess at how many people are signed up to play?
Kluge told me in the chat, so I'll let Scott guess.
He's invited. Yeah. How many are signed up to play?
Yeah.
15K. Does that seem too much? 5,000, five times 20,000. More?
Yep.
Come on.
Keep going.
25?
Keep going.
30.
Give or take.
33.
Yeah.
33,000 people.
Oh,
so when you see people complain about not being in, and I used to feel that, like, really? There's only maybe 4 or 5 aren't in? No, there's 30,000 that aren't in.
Well, so here's my point, though. Back to the original. I was saying sign up. Why not? You never know, because there are still a fair amount to go, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is, and I know Scott's really good about this, if you've applied and signed up for 3 or 4 years and you haven't gotten in, he'll get you in at some point. Right. And I'm like, you might as well sign up this year then. Like, go ahead and start the clock. You know what I mean? Like, if you're gonna get in, like, just start why not put your name in the hat? And there's a ton of contests, and we had our own, obviously, for a spot. There's a ton of opportunity to get in. So I would say if you're active, if you're engaging on Twitter, if you're paying attention to Scott's tweets, you can still get in. So don't give up, even though it may feel hopeless because there's, I guess, 30,000 people that don't get in.
Or reach out to people like me that are putting on the live draft, kiss my butt, beg and plead, and I'm like, okay, sure, come on.
Well, on that note, we do still need a couple people. So back to what I said before, if you're, if you're in the Canton area and want to come draft, right, send us a DM. You never know, maybe we can bump you up or something. So we'll see what we do. Yeah. But I guess that does go back to the point, and I know a couple years ago when I think it was Scott Fishbowl 9 was my first year, and it felt like everybody got in. Like, I didn't feel like there were that many people that didn't get in.
Everybody was left out.
And then I remember in Scott Fishbowl 10, which was kind of the beginning of COVID, it felt like a lot more people signed up, right? A lot more people heard about it and wanted to get in. And Scott Fishbowl 10 was like the big one. And then I remember thinking there's a lot of people that didn't get in that, but it was still, I mean, at that point, I think it was 1,200 teams, right? It was 112 person teams, which was nuts.
It was 12.
And I remember thinking like, that was crazy. 1,200 people in the league. What are we talking about? And I think it was like 5,000 signed up or something like that. And I'm still like, well, that's a pretty good odds. And now we're at 3,000 with 33,000 signed up. Like, you're okay. Don't get upset if you don't get in, but at the same time, keep trying. Don't give up and put your name in the hat. You never know. But yeah, I'm excited to draft. And Scott Fishbowl this year being all about live drafting in cities and localities. And I love the theme of that, getting everybody back together, especially after COVID. Like, oh, what a great idea. I know he wanted to do it for 11 to do Scott Fishbowl live with that. And I'm glad we could actually get it done this year. I'm just really happy that it's happening. And a lot of it too is just to raise money for Fantasy Cares and other charities. I know there's a bunch of different ways to raise money for things. And I know Scott's big on this, but we always try to say too, like, let's donate some money to charity in your league, right? Take an entry fee, donate it to the charity of the winner's choice at the end of the season. Pick something, help somebody out, right? I mean, you don't need, if it's $100 league, you don't need $800. Make it $700 and donate some of that. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So again, there's plenty of causes out there, plenty of reasons, plenty of people, especially with all the things going on in the world of politics and all this lately. There's plenty of places that could use your donation. So that's the main reason of this. And I want to make sure we bring that home. Even if you're not in, buy the shirts, buy the stickers, donate money to your charities, keep engaging. And you never know, maybe next year you'll get in, right? Keep trying. That's the whole point.
Do finalists get lifetime invites? Is that how that works? Or,
I don't know. I guess you'll see, because you're a finalist, Richard.
I can't. I was like the first. I know I was in the first wave and I was shocked. I was like, oh, wow, this happened already? Like, because I didn't even think they were even going out. And I was like, that had to be because of being a finalist, right?
Scott and I were discussing, and he said he'd have to look it up, but he swears that I was in the first one. So I've been in it ever since.
Wow.
And I think it was only because he was looking for, like, things to give away.
Right.
And, so I used to, always give away guides and stuff. But if not, I've definitely it has, maybe number 2 or 3, because it seems like it's been forever. But,
that's crazy.
Like I told him, I said, look, you've inspired. I said, if you've done anything other than everything you did, I said, look how many charity type leagues are out there across the world. I mean, I'm in one with 5-yard rush guys in England. I'm in the Warrior Bowl. I'm in the European Fantasy Championships for charity. I mean, it's like, I go, dude, you have worldwide effect on people.
Big time. Yep.
That is something that not many people can say, and especially in this industry.
And I think too, the idea that 33,000 have applied, like, what? That's such that's a crazy amount of attention. Yeah. That's a crazy amount of eyes. That's a lot of people talking about it. And that really was his goal. I know, even a few years ago when he was trying to expand it and grow it and kind of bring more eyeballs to it, this is what he was talking about. It wasn't about excluding anyone. It's not about gatekeeping. It's not about popularity. None of that. It's to just get as many people as we can in the leagues. And think about it, guys. If you're a commissioner of a 12-team league, which I am, that's frustrating and annoying. But try being a commissioner of, what would it be, like 200 of them now? Like 200 you're commissioning 200 leagues ish? 250? Well, I mean, that's ridiculous. Right. Yeah. But like, give the guy some credit. We're doing this as speed as we can. Like, we're growing as fast as we can't put everybody in it. It just isn't there yet. So now this year, though, I do want to pivot on this. This is the first year that Sleeper's getting involved, which I think I kind of like, I guess. I know it's kind of a sensitive subject for some people, but I like it bringing more eyeballs, bringing more people.
Yeah, but you know what? It brings a lot. Yes.
There are a lot of people
awareness.
that don't like my fantasy league and are not interested in joining a league on that site. I love MFL. I know we're a very much pro MFL podcast,
Right.
Pro Superflex and all that stuff. But there are a lot of casuals, a lot of people that do this for 1 or 2 leagues a year that are only on Sleeper. And this is giving them that opportunity to say, oh, I've heard of that, or Sleeper's involved. It must be real. It must be good. Like those of us that are in the industry deep, that have been in this for a long time are familiar. But there's a lot of people out there that are just now hearing about it. And that's awesome. So say what you want about Sleeper and not enjoying it or whatever. There's always that debate. I love that Sleeper's getting involved and is actually doing a very aggressive job of it. Like they're involved with it. They want this, and that is awesome. So I'm happy about that. Regardless of what you think about the platform, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's what
anytime, you can get the bigger sites that have the power that can get involved with helping. It's, the Expo is another example of, NBC Sports is, the title sponsor this year. Fantasy Points is sponsoring the Friday party.
That'd be good.
Football Guys is hugely involved. So, that just helps the street cred of the whole thing. Yep. Them promoting it, them talking about it, them trying to get, their followers and fans and everybody involved. So, yeah, it's, getting Sleeper involved with that's going to continue to help Scott and, so will we. So.
Well, and I'm excited because I think the live drafts, from what I understand, are all going to be on Sleeper. We don't find out our draft slot until we show up at the draft, at least for Canton. That's what we're doing. I wanted to see if I could, I don't want to say corner you, but like ask you on the spot, like what is the guideline? What do we have rules for how we're deciding spots? Because I love numbers out of a hat, right? I love doing something like when we show up, we put our numbers in a hat, we pull it out. Like I love
the only thing I thought about was I like that 100-yard rush thing. I think that's kind of fun.
Well, like a literal, we're all going to run 100 yards, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that way I'll be 12th.
That's what I want is 3 RR. I want third round reversal. I want the back end.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, that's what I'm thinking. I don't know. We'll see. I've done cards before where you draw the cards and then you pick your spot. We'll see.
We'll see. Whatever it is.
I'm trying to think of something fun. Maybe I'll just put it up to the group. Like, all right, what's the funnest thing that we can do quickly and, and still get to kind of pick, I'm
gonna call it now. I have a feeling whatever draft we're in, we're only supposed to go for 2 hours or whatever. I bet we finish in 2 hours, man. We're all gonna be so jacked up. Like we're just gonna be going.
If we don't
finish
no trades,
in 2 hours, let's go.
We really should have a problem. I mean,
yeah. We'll see.
Yeah, it's not like it's a dynasty draft. You got to make trades in that. It's just make a pick.
Yeah, I know. I've been doing mocks in under an hour.
I know Scott wants
22.
Only do 10 rounds, but I just want to get it done.
What does he know? What is he running this or something? He doesn't have to know.
He's never gonna know.
That's right. He'll never find out. All right. So I want to make sure that we give enough time to that. Was there anything else you wanted to bring up, Bob? I know you're involved with a lot of that stuff. Obviously, your consistency guide is kind of why you're here and where I wanted to go next.
Yes.
So how long have you been writing your consistency guide? Scott showed it on the screen there for last year's.
There's a new
how long
cover.
have you been
writing
that's
last year's. Oh, you don't have the new one yet. Oh, okay.
No.
So this is last year's. I just want to say for all the kids out there is a digital version, and yes, I did get the digital version this year, but I am typically a paper guy, so I do.
I like paper too. Yeah, I'm with you.
And it's funny too because people are like, I assume you sell mostly the Kindle version, and I'm like, no, it's 98% hard copy.
Yeah.
I mean, numbers so far this year, I think, I don't remember what the total was, but yeah, it's like less than 5% of. Wow. And to be honest with you, I don't know if somebody buys both. It just says, here's my hard copy and here's the digital. And, like digital is like 17 so far. But if you buy the hard copy, you get the digital for free.
Right.
Because I don't charge you if you buy the digital separate, it's less. But if you buy the hard copy, I think you can get the digital for free. But anyway,
well, I think there's a lot of places that I know that you give away the digital too. Like you were mentioning with Scott Fishbowl,
PDF copies, like it's my job.
And I love that. I think that's such a good idea.
And it's for the charities. I mean, that's what I do it for.
Yep. You don't just give it away to randoms. You're giving it away for a reason.
I go, hey, I'll send you one copy. You can send it to everybody who signs up who gives you at least $25. That way they get something, helps me because it gets somebody to notice my book that never knew about it. And next year they'll buy it. And so, yeah, I do that all the time. just to help the cause.
And I think that's where I got it last year. I think it was in Warrior Bowl or one of those charity leagues.
Warrior
I got
Bowl,
it for free from them. So I was just like, oh, perfect. I was going to buy, literally, I was like going to buy it the next week. I was like, oh, it's time for our redraft season. It's time to start studying. And I was like, oh, wait, that's right. I got it in my email. I'm like, oh, sweet. So I think that's where I got it from. But let's get into the consistency. So I know you've been you've been doing the consistency guide for how long? Let's start with
2015 was the first year that I put it out there on Amazon. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. And how long have you been playing fantasy football?
Since 1985.
1985, when I was 4 or so, 3 or 4 years old. Yeah. And I was not playing.
You guys are one of the few that I usually get interviewed by that actually been alive when I actually really.
That's right. We're an older. We're on the older side. Well, I know Rocky's even older, and he's not here, so he's the elder statesman of the group. But
that's true.
I will say that playing since 1985, you've seen a ton of changes. You've seen as many variations as there can be, and I love that your angle, you're in on this, is what doesn't change. Right? You're like, let's go with consistency. How do we find out from year to year what guys are we going after? And maybe if you don't mind, like explain a little bit about how the how the consistency metrics came to be. Where did this sort of process start in your world? And then we can kind of get into some specific player options.
So I mean, when I actually came up with this concept and so it was just like anybody, you're playing the league for a few years and then you have that unique year where you've got these top players. So the year was 2002 and I had Shaun Alexander, who was the league MVP, rushed for 15 touchdowns. And because we started before the internet, we did touchdown only. So you ran a touchdown, you got 6 points. The caught touchdown was 3 points. That was it. And so obviously running backs who rushed a lot of touchdowns were pretty much league winners for you, or they should be. So I had Shaun Alexander. My team was the second highest scoring team in the league, and I went 7-7 in the regular season, and I didn't make the playoffs. So as a bean counter for my real job, I'm like, okay, I got to look at this. I got to analyze this. I got to dive into the numbers. What the hell happened here?
Yeah.
Well, what happened is that one week on a Monday night, Shaun Alexander rushed for 5 touchdowns in one game, and 2 other games he had 3 and 2. So basically, in 3 games out of the first 14, he scored 2/3 of his touchdowns. The other
that's
ones
not consistent. Yeah.
So I figured out if he would have scored just 1 touchdown a week, instead of, for 14 weeks, instead of 15 and 5 games of those 14, I would have won 2 more games, made the playoffs, and won the championship because he had a huge week 15 and 16. And that's where it started. So I said, well, okay, if I can get week by week stats, and then I put that in Excel, and then just happened to have a brother-in-law who did Visual Basics, which is an old school database.
I remember,
online stuff. Yeah. And so he created the way we could calculate it and run it through that, and create, how to get my numbers and get the consistency from 0 to 100%. And that's where it got created. And then over time, and then the book came later because I was putting an article into people's books that were being sold on the newsstands. So Peter Kreutzer had the fantasy guide. I used to write for Creative Sports and Fanball, the original Fanball. And so they had magazines, and I would put an article about consistency. And I kept trying to push them into adding my consistency data for the players into the profiles, to add it to to give them a unique twist. And they're all like, we don't have enough room. And so then that's where the book came from. Is somebody said, you could write your own book and publish it on Amazon for free. They just take a portion out of everything you sell. And I'm like, okay. So I did. And so here we are, 5 straight years of being nominated best fantasy guy in the country, won the award in 2018. And as they say, the rest is history. So that's how we got to today. And, people love it. And I just got another email from somebody today that thanked me. They bought this year's book and wanted to thank me. They forgot to email me last year to tell me they won the championship and it was the best year they ever had. And thank you so much. And that's what makes it worth it. I mean, making a little money is fine, but that's kind of stuff that just jacks me up to keep doing it. Like, hey, somebody like relied on me and, won a championship, has got a trophy and, some extra money for the wife and kids. And that's what makes it cool. So.
Titles last forever, right? We talk about this a lot in this show. And this is where I wanted to go with this, because I think at some point Dynasty becomes redraft, right? When you just got to get the wins. You can have the prettiest roster. You can do all the moves you need to make in the offseason. But if you don't start the right people, none of it matters. And this is going to sound a little strange maybe to some people, but if you don't win titles, what the hell are we doing here? Like you can't just be perpetually rebuilding. You can't just be
I've
got a really good roster.
I'm playing for next year. Like you've been doing it for 5 straight years. I'm playing for every year.
Why not win something for a change? Like that's the whole point. And especially like in a normal 12-team league, you get one winner every year. What is more important, having the coolest roster every year or winning 3 out of 5 years? Winning 3 out of 5 years is phenomenal. That's the whole point of this. So that's where I wanted to pivot into this and be like, well, let's talk about consistency in Dynasty, because I think that there is some gap maybe in the knowledge in general on Twitter and in Dynasty players and all of this, where you want to have these Dynasty rankings, you want to have Dynasty values and trade calculators and all these things, but at the end of the day, you got to score points, right? At the end of the day, you need players and teams that can put up numbers against your opponents in your league to win titles for you. That's the whole point of this. So I wanted to make sure that we spend a little bit of time in saying, well, how do you use consistency metrics and what you've learned from your knowledge and study on consistency in Dynasty leagues specifically? Like, are there things that come into play when you're making trades in the off season, or is it really more of an in season, like what to start, who to start kind of thing?
Well, as you know, Andrew, because we're in a league together, you see a lot of my anger when people don't like my trades, or I think trades they make suck because they're trading a very consistent veteran for some half-assed possible breakout rookie. And I'm like, what in the hell are you doing? So needless to say, I've learned a lot from being in that league and have tried to adjust my numbers. But like you said, in the end, you still want those players that score on a consistent basis. And I don't care if you got a second-year, player or a 6-year player. You still got to put a good roster out there. And upside, while it's great for long term, it's not great for week to week. And so, getting a player that may have upside is great. But in the end, what you're really trying to get is a player that can stay up there, one up week a week, a month isn't going to win you a lot of fantasy leagues, regardless of what your format is.
Yep.
So 25 or 50% consistency isn't gonna cut it. When I'm looking at players, I'm taking more of the give me a 2-year to 6-year guy that I can feel comfortable either is, had maybe a good consistent second half that might be ready to take that step. I might make a trade for them, and maybe trade off a rookie pick. I mean, so as Andrew knows, I traded all my picks in our Dynasty League.
Yep.
And I got Stephon Diggs, DK Metcalf, Alvin Kamara. Who else did I get? I got Kamara from you.
I gave you Kamara. Yep.
And so I traded my first round. I had 2 first-round picks, and I traded them for Diggs and Metcalf. And then I think I traded you Metcalf for Kamara.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Yep.
And so now I already have Eckler and Fournette and some other good receivers, and I have 2 good quarterbacks in Brady and Josh Allen in Superflex. Traded for Deshaun Watson with Andrew. So
yep. I wanted to talk about that one. Yeah.
That's caused me to drink a lot over the last couple of weeks, but
Yeah.
But that's the fun part is I wanted to, I was like, okay, I'm going to take that risk. Yep. Is it going to pay off? Well, we'll see. We got a couple more weeks, but, and I was in a Dynasty draft with a bunch of other guys from Columbus just a couple weekends ago, and Deshaun Watson went in the 3rd round. Yeah. Now it was Rich Dotson from Dynasty Nerds. I mean, pretty high street cred.
Yeah.
So, so that's what I think is kind of fun about Dynasty is that taking a risk. It was a fun startup draft. I went in there with trying to get youngsters, but potential consistent youngsters like Javonte Williams and Dalvin Cook and CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson. Guys that certainly are stars, but they're still pretty young. And so, I think my draft went pretty well. I think I sent it to you guys. You guys seem to like it. So yeah, I'm learning a lot, but I'm also applying the consistency. And I think it's a very important factor in Dynasty that is probably forgot about because people are all about the shiny new toy and what I can get for next year and the future. And it's all about the future. It's like, you you're supposed to be playing for now too.
Yeah. And I think Scott, who has 40 leagues, obviously has an opinion about this, right? Scott knows what he's doing when it comes to leagues.
And Bob, so one of the things is, and it's funny, is you're talking about like how you always had that like section in a magazine of, you know, your consistency rankings. And like, that's something that I read every year religiously. And I was always like, okay, yeah, this makes total sense. And I think it was 2020, maybe 2019, it kind of started, but for a while there, we had a group of tight ends. Okay. And that position, because we're not talking tight end premium necessarily, a lot of redraft leagues. And then even as I got into Dynasty, I noticed that having that elite tight end was such an advantage. And that's one of the things your guide pointed out was there's only, you know, 4 players or something with over 65% consistency when there used to be like 11. Right.
Yeah.
And so that number, you know, cut down by, you know, 66%. Like that's crazy. And that's been such an advantage for me in my leagues, even like Scott Fishbowl having an elite tight end every year, and all of my redraft leagues going tight end early and having, you know, Kelsey or Andrews, basically. That's it. Really just those two. And then even building my dynasty teams around that. Do you think that's a product of like the young guys aren't having as big of an impact? Do you think that's going to change now that we have some of the Pitts and Hawkinsons and all that, and as maybe some of these guys age out? Like over the years, have you seen that as kind of a cycle, or do you think it's just the way that the NFL is going right now?
It is kind of a cycle. I'm not sure it's a cycle we can predict. So, you know, in the guide, if I may reference page 120.
Yes.
So here's the last, well, I guess it would be, 5-6 years. So number of tight ends over 200 plus fantasy points, and then number of tight ends over 65% consistency. All right. So 2017, 3 and 8. Then 18 was 4 and 7. So not great. But 2019 jumps up to 5 over 200 and 11 over 65%.
That's crazy.
And so it's like, all right, we finally got some consistency out of the tight end position. Guess what happens the next year? We go down to 2 and 4.
Yeah.
But 2021 bounces back up to 3, which is still not a lot over 200 points, but back to 10 over 65%. So I feel like there are enough youngsters that are now playing pertinent roles in their offense that will, I think, keep that number there. We've got the Dawson Knox, Dalton Schultz, you know, like you said, Hawkinson. You know, of course, we know Andrews and Kelsey. But
Freiermuth even, right? Yeah, like a younger guy. Freiermuth coming up too, right? Like
Freiermuth coming up. Yeah. Irv Smith hasn't played yet, and he's got a lot of talent playing in
Dawson
Minnesota.
Knox, right? Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, Dawson Knox. You know, Njoku for Cleveland. I mean, let's be honest. If Brissett's the quarterback, guess what? He ain't going to be throwing the bombs a lot. He's going to be hitting the, you know, Kareem Hunts and Njokus. So I think there's a lot of consistency to be had. You know, again, if you drafted, you know, if you got Dalton Schultz early on last year, I picked him up in a lot of leagues because I'm like, oh, well, you know, he's going to take Blake Jarwin, and Jarwin had a decent year the year before. You know, now this kid, you know, going to be a star. So, and like I said, there's lots of them out there. There's even veterans like Tyler Higbee and Zach Ertz. And, you know, so I think there's a better depth. You know, this year I'm not looking too early for tight ends.
Yeah,
I'm kind of
that's exactly what I was getting at.
Yeah,
I think I'm going to switch back now to
I'm
to
usually doing Schultz and Knox, or Schultz and Higbee, or Schultz and, you know, somebody like that, some combination of, you know, 8th, 9th round. Ertz is in that group. That I think you can get some great value that late. So.
I completely agree. And I think that you guys are hitting the nail on the head, though. It used to be one way, it changed, and now it's back. And I feel like that's kind of how fantasy goes in general. And if you keep your eye on these trends year over year, you can kind of, I wouldn't say get ahead of the game, but you can kind of be more forward thinking and proactive. And that's what I love about the consistency guide, because it shows you the past, but it shows you in a way that tries not predict the future, but tries to say, well, based on the model, based on the numbers and the metrics, and, you know, just how they used them last year, this is what we were expecting for this year. Right. So I wanted to get into some players too, but I mean, keep going if you want.
No, I was just going to say that's a reason in every profile, there's a little section called clutch games by week. And I try to have people focus on that, especially if like they had a great second half. So maybe for the year they were 8 out of 16 or 8 out of 17, so like 50%, which doesn't give you good numbers, but they got 6 out of 8 in the last 8 weeks. Those are the kind of guys, like if you'd go back to my prior magazines, I predicted Antonio Gates, Jimmy Graham, and George Kittle, who all had a great second half and then broke out to be top 5 the next year.
Yeah. Well, who's that this year? Give us the secret sauce here, Bob. Predict it right now. Like, no, I'm just kidding.
Well, I think it's still Dalton Schultz in my opinion, but
yeah, I do too. Yeah. Well, I'm all over the place on him. It depends on his cost, but I'm with you. Like I like Schultz as like an 8th, 9th round pick. You know what I mean? Where you don't have to pay a lot for him. That's perfect. But I've seen him go in startups even in like 6th round and stuff, and I'm like, that seems a little rich.
Yeah,
like,
especially the tight end premium. He went pretty early in our draft last weekend.
Yep.
Because it was a tight end premium too, but.
Well, so I wanted to talk a little bit about that, but I mean, even just in general, there's a lot of players. I know that you talk about every player in your guide pretty much. You go through everybody's numbers, you put them all through the rigmarole here. But there are some players that I know that have been kind of brought up here and there on Twitter, and I just wanted to ask you about before we get into Find Me a Trade and some other things. I know the one that I put first is my boy Joe Mixon. I'm still not quite sure what to think of Mr. Mixon, right? I know that, again, as a Bengals fan, and everybody knows I'm a Bengals fan, I don't hide my Bengals fandom. So I don't have a lot of Mixon. I just don't. I have one share, I think, because I'm willing to take other guys in that position. And then by the time Mixon's up, there's almost always somebody I still like more. But I think this year is going to be a big year for that whole offense. And I guess I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on Joe Mixon from a consistency standpoint? He seemed to be a little bit all over the place last year, but was that just a product of things that we can't predict or can't project, or do we think that's going to happen again?
Well, to be honest with you, I mean, Joe Mixon certainly this year is the poster boy for inconsistency and why this book exists. Everybody that picks up a magazine and looks at the total points says, "Oh my God, Joe Mixon was 4th in total points last year. I am picking him in like 6th overall, man. It's cool." But then what they don't see, because they don't have the guide, is the 63% consistency, and that ranked him 18th of all the running backs.
Yep.
Last year, when he only played 6 games, was 67%. Here's the sad part, is that these last 2 years are the 2 best years Joe Mixon's ever had in consistency.
Whew, that's not good.
Yeah. I did a quick little thing. So I have a tool on the website, on the Big Guy Fantasy Sports website, that shows historical consistency for 1, 2, 3, however many years they've played. And it shows their breakdown, home versus away versus good defense, bad defense, that kind of stuff. Normally what you see out of especially a star player in consistency is that when they are playing at home, like it's a bad defense, they destroy them. They're 90%, they're 100%, that kind of stuff. That's what you would expect. Aaron Jones, the last 3 years, 92% consistent, 28 points a game, right? And he's sharing time. Joe Mixon the last 3 years is only 60% at home against a bad defense.
Wow.
That's when he should be destroying teams. That's when they should be using him more, because the defense isn't good against the run, and they should be running him. But he doesn't have trouble staying healthy, even though he did get hurt in 2020. But the problem is, last year he scored 51% of his total points in 6 weeks between week 6 and week 12. There's a bye in there. So he was like super hot right in the middle. And if you had him, man, you were rolling those 6 weeks.
Yeah.
But the other, 11 weeks, he was 4 for 11.
He was cold. Yeah.
Cold.
But see, now, don't you think some of that comes back to the offensive line and the team and like how the team is playing? And like, again, there's a lot of, what ifs that we can kind of go down. So I guess I'm just curious how that plays into this, and, how a change like that you can look back and say, well, he wasn't that consistent, but they might have fixed the one thing that made him inconsistent in a sense.
Well, that's true. And so, so now we look into 2022, he's got an improved offensive line. They're playing in a division where the offenses are not going to be super strong. I mean, Pittsburgh's got a new quarterback. Lamar has nobody to throw the ball to. They'll run the crap out of the ball, but that's not going to cause a reason, to throw the ball a lot. They're not playing the AFC West.
Right.
And Cleveland is Cleveland. So, they're not going to be 42-35 shootouts. So I would think that Mixon should be a solid, like if you get him as their RB2, I'm perfectly fine with it. Like if you get him in the mid-second round and you've already got Dalvin Cook or Kamara or whoever you like, I think it's a fine pick. I don't think I'm going to pick him in the first round as my RB1. But I think he's got potential to improve on that consistency with a better offensive line and maybe a little bit scaled down. Now, the problem is then everybody who wants Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Joe Burrow are going to go, ooh, wait a minute, I don't want Joe Mixon running the ball, because that takes away from what I want. Right. So, one of those has to give.
Yep. Well, and that's where,
well,
we don't know, right? And that's where I wanted to kind of pivot to, because the other running back I put in our list was Ezekiel Elliott, which I think is he's all over the map in fantasy and Dynasty in general. Like there are players that do Dynasty for a living, in a sense, that are just out. They're done. They don't want anything to do with him. But then there are others that but he finished his RB5 for the season. And he was amazing. Well, exactly. He was RB7 for the season. Right. He's a top 12 running back without a doubt, but his points per game were like RB14 or something, So he's one of those prime examples in my mind of he's available, he plays, but is he really a winner? So he and Mixon both, in my mind, are kind of in that same boat where they play well overall, but are they weak winners? I don't know. I don't think so.
Well, and again, same thing. Zeke was 7th in total points and 16th, 65% consistent. So basically, Mixon and Elliott, if he had those two last year and you thought you were going to run away with your league, you probably didn't make the playoffs.
Yeah. How frustrating would that have been? Oh my God, to have RB5 and 7 and be 7 and 10, or what would be 7 and 5 or whatever, exactly just missing the play. That would be brutal.
But we know Zeke was not 100%. He's already said that. He says he's back. He's healthy. The offensive line is back in shape. I think they need to run the ball more because they only have CeeDee Lamb. They're not going to have Gallup for at least 4 to 6 weeks. Schultz.
They lost Cooper. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Zeke will be used a lot. I think they'll use Pollard as much too. But, they used Pollard quite a bit last year. We did some sharing quite often in those games. And Zeke was still 7th. Now, his consistency certainly didn't hit the numbers. But, again, Zeke is my RB2. Yeah. In fact, I think I was in a league, one of my early mock drafts I do with Murph from England. I think it was back in March. And I think I had the 3rd pick. I always had the 3rd pick in every month's draft. And I think I went Derrick Henry, Ezekiel Elliott, and Saquon Barkley in 1, 2, 3. I was like,
solid start.
I want to play that one out. Now that's changed. Barkley's moved up quite a bit. But it just shows you I've seen Zeke at the end of the 2nd round quite a few drafts.
I know in redraft last year, I think I got him in the 6th round of a redraft last year, going into the year. And I was like, man, what a steal. And then of course, like you just said it, I started him every week. And every week I was like, well, he put up 12 points. I mean, that's something. You know what I mean? It wasn't
good, but it's not what you thought you were going to get.
Winning me anything, and I did not win that league. Yeah. Right. So the only other running back I wanted to kind of pivot into here and kind of using as a larger point in general, I guess, was Breece Hall, the clear-cut 101, I think, in almost every rookie draft. Mm-hmm. I would even argue the only rookie that we all agreed on value-wise. Everybody else, even in Superflex, it's all over the place. Right. But I guess I wanted to use that as a way to be well, how do you judge someone like a Breece Hall in terms of consistency without any past NFL performance? And then in general, how do you do that with rookies? Where do you kind of slot them in, or how do you evaluate them, or do you just kind of leave it and see where we go?
Well, again, let us reference the Gospel According to Consistency on page 9, where I do an article every year because I get this question from everybody every year and always have. What do you do with rookies? And it's literally called Rookies versus Consistency. And so since 2010, so for 12 years, I have put into this chart the top 4 rounds of quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. So since 2010, so for 12 years, there have been 428 of those players picked in the first 4 rounds. Any of them that play at least 10 games and exceed a 60% consistency rating. Not great, but still pretty good. Only 46 of them in those 12 years out of the 428. So basically rounded off about 10%. So that means 90% of the rookies in the first 4 rounds since 2010 have failed at getting over 60%.
Wow.
And by position, it gets really wild. So tight ends, there's only been 3, and that's Evan Ingram, Jordan Reed, Jordan Reed. And then last year, Kyle Pitts finally.
Kyle Pitts, yeah.
So that's it. 3 of them. So not Gronk, not Kelsey, not Zach Ertz, not any of those guys.
Right.
So the only thing that, quarterbacks are Cam Newton, Prescott, Robert Griffin, Mariota, Herbert, Baker Mayfield, and then Kyle Murray. So, so running backs, quarterbacks, and tight ends, you can look at those groups and go, some have continued success, some have not.
Right.
Now, wide receivers, that is a big difference. And that's the one thing I do want to stress for those people out there, especially in dynasty leagues.
Right. Because this was a big wide receiver rookie year. Yeah.
So if they exceeded over 60% in their rookie year, they have almost every single one of them have had continued consistency success since.
Oh, really?
So let me name off this list. Tell me if there's any of these that you're like, there's actually one. I will say there is one. And you'll figure it out as soon as I hit him. So Odell Beckham, Michael Thomas, AJ Green, Jamar Chase, Julio Jones, Keenan Allen, DK Metcalf. I'll save the worst for last. Brandon Ayuk. Okay, he's still.
I've been buying him, so that's a good sign.
Juju Smith-Schuster, Jalen Waddle, Justin Jefferson, Jarvis Landry, Cooper Kupp, Mike Evans, Allen Robinson, Brandon Cooks, Deebo Samuel. The only one that I feel that's failed would be Kelvin Benjamin in 2014.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Wow.
That's it.
It's still a hell of a list, though.
The rest of that. So
insane.
When you see a rookie step in and do 60% or higher, you need to trade for him. Get him on your team.
Okay.
The problem
Write
is
that down. That's good.
When you draft them as a rookie, you don't know which ones are going to make it.
Right.
Well, so I guess maybe
like Justin Jefferson. How many people of that class would have picked Justin Jefferson to be the superstar player out of that group? How many others have fallen to the wayside?
I'm pretty sure I took Rager over Jefferson in like 3 different drafts. That hurts so bad. Anyway, I was going to say this, like on that topic, even like at what point do you get enough data where you're like, I'm in? Like at 3 weeks? Is it 6 weeks? Like, again, it's up to you, obviously, as the manager, but I'm just saying, like, as someone who pays attention to consistency, what's a big enough sample size?
You probably are not going to get it in the first half of the year. In fact,
that was going to be my guess too. Yeah.
I was going to say, I bet if we looked at the data and the clutch games per week for those guys in their rookie season, it's a great topic for me to look into, is of those guys, when did the consistency start showing up? Now Jamar Chase was pretty quick.
Yeah. And Jefferson wasn't that quick, but pretty quick. Yeah.
Jefferson was pretty quick, but my thought is many of them probably were second half stars once they started to gel with their offense. Because most of the times these guys don't walk in as the number one.
Right.
They're like Jamar did, like, Debo has.
Who do we have from the last couple of years? Jalen Waddle, Brandon Ayuk. Is that
Debo 2019?
Debo was a couple years.
And then obviously
Ayuk.
Jefferson.
Let's be honest. Ayuk really only hit it because Samuel got hurt.
He was the only option. Right. Okay.
Right.
Gotcha.
So his was more opportunity than it was talent. I mean, he's got talent, but once Debo came back, then that was gone.
Yeah.
So, again, Ayuk is still kind of the book is still open on whether or not he's going to be a success, but most of these other guys have been pretty succul.
Well, and then Waddle gets
Waddle was there. So, like I said, it's numbers. People are always like, you hate rookies. No, that's not true. I don't hate rookies. I just have 90% failure rate that kind of tells me that maybe I'm not a big fan.
Wild.
Well, and that's some actionable advice right there. I mean, that's something we can take to the bank. And we have some other players that I wanted to get into, but I kind of feel like maybe we should leave that for your guide to explain to people. right? Like let's not give away all the goods here. I feel like
we can. I know you got some wide receivers. I mean, we can hit them quickly. I've got the numbers
and that's where I wanted. The only one of the wide receivers that I really wanted to get into was DeAndre Hopkins. I've had some different debates with people on DeAndre Hopkins. There was a friendly charity I bet that I have with somebody. I forget. I think it's Bosco. I think if I recall. But so we were talking about Hopkins versus Olave. Right, like a rookie who's got a lot of upside, a lot of potential, but in a busy offense, and then Hopkins who's missing 6 games. Like, how do you attribute that like missing games factor for consistency? Because obviously that's going to be zeros for 6 weeks. He's not going to get a 60%. You know what I mean? Like, do you factor that in at all? I guess is going to be my question.
It's hard to factor in. I mean, obviously, because it's a percentage. Like Hopkins last year only played 10 games, but he was still 80% consistent. In those 10 games. So when he's on the field, he's got that consistency factor. Now that was injuries. This is suspension. The thing I usually say is at least we know that he's going to be back in 6 weeks. Like it's not he could be back in couldn't be. Right. It's not a Michael Thomas that may drag out for 2.5 years.
Right.
So at least in couple redrafts and I was in the FSGA expert draft a few weeks ago in Detroit. So I took DeAndre Hopkins in the 7th round as my 3rd wide receiver. I have Devontae Adams and Cortland Sutton and his 14 teams. So, I'll fill in with Lazard and some other guys, for a few weeks, for 6 weeks. But then, if I can go 4-2 in those 6 weeks and now get Hopkins and add to that, then I feel pretty good about it. But
you can take a risk on guys like Landry and other players that might get hurt after 6 weeks. You know what I mean? You can kind of fill that in. You can stagger through. Yeah, I don't mind that.
Right. So, again, I think it depends on where you have to draft him. I've heard some people, on Sirius XM, they're like, I'm not drafting Hopkins at all. I don't care where he falls to me. I'm like, value is value, man. I mean, if he's my 4th wide receiver, hell yeah, I'm going to put him on my team.
Well, so just as a quick sidebar to that is one of my biggest pet peeves in this entire industry, if there is such a thing as an industry here, when someone's like, I'm out on so-and-so because of something, like he's missing 6 games, I'm out. Like Michael Thomas even. There were people last year like, I'm not drafting Michael Thomas. And I'm like, you're telling me if he's on waivers after your draft, you're not going to pick him up.
Right.
That's ridiculous. Of course you would. Like it's different, in my opinion. It's different for like a Deshaun Watson or a Tyreek Hill or a Joe Mixon who has like, I just don't like those players. I don't want them on my team. I get that, right? It's a personal decision. But as opposed to like Hopkins, who we know is missing 6 weeks, I definitely would draft him in the 10th round, 8th round. Like no problem at all. Because when he gets back on that field, I think that offense is going to be humming. I mean, you're going to obviously you've got Marquise Brown there as the potential 1, but when Hopkins steps on the field, Brown becomes the 2. Right. I'm sorry, but Hopkins is still the guy there, even if he is 30. I don't care.
Well, so but the difference is you have a Marquise Brown now that can stretch the field that you didn't have before.
Yep.
And now Hopkins gets all these underneath routes. I mean, he's going to get that 8 catches for 70 yards and get 15 points. If he scores a touchdown, you got 21. I'll take that every day of the week. So, yeah.
No, and that's kind of where I wanted
to die on. He's going to die on my rosters for sure. It was after 2018 when he had that 100% consistency.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, how often does that happen?
Not often. So Antonio Brown did it 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then missed the 4th game of the next year. I think I want to say he had 36 straight clutch games. Cooper Kupp, of course, had 100% last year.
Yep.
But it's very rare out of any position. Quarterback, running back, it doesn't matter. It's very rare. And especially if they play all the games. Like there's been some 100% that, for 10 for 10 and then got hurt.
Sure.
But play all games, 100% consistency. It's few and far between. I guarantee you it's less than 10 for sure. Probably 5.
And Hopkins is one of those guys. Like that's a guy I want on my team. And honestly, he's somebody I've been trying to buy in Dynasty for, I don't know, I feel like a couple months now, ever since that PED suspension came out. And I'm like, this is a long game. We're looking at this like he is 30. I get it. He's over the hill, but he's a top 5 asset in most places as an NFL asset. Like he can come into a team, and we saw this. I actually didn't think he was going to do that well. I remember going on, I think it was the FF Astronauts podcast before, like when he got traded from the Texans. And I made like a bet for, fake money or whatever it is. Like, I don't think he does that well in Arizona. I just think there's too much change going on. I think he and Watson had this rapport and the offense flew through him and all this. And I was wrong. I was 100% wrong. He landed and dominated and had no problem in Arizona. And I was like, well, I stand corrected. And at this point, I wouldn't say I'm swung the other way, but like, how do you not trust that guy? Yeah. So yeah, that was the main receiver I definitely wanted to bring on. And then I know we have some different tight ends. I'll just, the one that I don't know how to value, and we can maybe go down a little rabbit hole here, but we mentioned him earlier, but Dawson Knox, right? He's one of those guys that has a ton of upside on an offense that has a lot of weapons and a lot of rushing, and Josh Allen does a lot of it himself. Like, how do you evaluate someone like a Dawson Knox on a top tier offense, but is he a top tight end? And does it matter when there's only really 3 of them? And after that, you're on your own. I mean, like, it doesn't matter if he's not consistent.
I think a lot of it is going to depend on where he's going. So like right now, his ADP is tight end 9. Let me see where they've got him being drafted at. Knox.
Well, and again, as a tight end, you don't have to be that great to be
right. So I mean, he's at 102, so he's pretty far down there. So, like I said, he's in that group with people like, Zach Ertz, Tyler Higbee, Dawson Knox, Gesicki, Hunter Henry. It's like, and they're all in that 65 to 70% consistency. I mean, Knox had some great stretches. So like, weeks 2, 3, 4, and 5, boom, 4 straight, then nothing for 4 weeks, then goes 4 for 6, and then nothing in 17 and 18. So
yeah,
I feel like he's almost too inconsistent. Now, his 53% ranks 14th in tight ends. That doesn't look terrible, but 53% is terrible.
Yeah.
For tight ends, it's not, but for
well, that's what I was going to say. Comparing him to other tight ends, that's not so bad. But
right.
Yeah,
it's not so bad. But like, here's the guy that like I'm kind of all over is that Tyler Higbee, which I know he's got an injury issue, but I should be healthy. He was 73% consistent last year, but he was 14th in total points.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I didn't realize he was that consistent.
Now, so you got to realize, they switch Woods with Allen Robinson, but there's no OBJ. And in fact, when OBJ was there, that's when Tyler kind of fell off. So he's not there. So I feel like if Higbee comes into camp healthy and he's going to like, tight end 22.
Oh yeah. He's cheap. He's
cheap. I've been in drafts where I just, pick him like as my backup, like I'll get whoever,
maybe a good
Knox,
best ball
Hawkinson, whoever, Schultz, and then get Higbee. If I need him, I'll put him as a flex. If he stays consistent,
especially in tight end premium, right? Like that makes an even bigger difference because he becomes like a wide receiver 3 at that kind of consistency. I mean, it's not a bad thing at all.
No.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so Higbee's somebody maybe we should target. That's some action we can take from this because there's a lot of players I know that don't even care about him. He's their second, third, whatever tight end.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Okay, and again, I don't think that enough has changed for that to be blown out of the water. I think that's probably going to stay consistent. For lack of
again, on that offense, they're going to be throwing the ball a lot. So he's definitely one. Like you said, there's a lot of guys like that are sitting there like a Cameron Brate. I mean,
so let's spend a second there. Yeah, so let's say Gronk is gone. Obviously, there's a lot of hype on Brate and Otten. I think the rookie, right? Like we don't know who it's going to be. We know, and obviously OJ Howard is gone. Like he's not even an option there anymore. But I mean, I don't know if Brate did enough to really be a fantasy tight end for me. I just don't know if I'm excited enough about him. And part of me is like, well, maybe we take a risk on the new guy on Otten, see if he can be the guy. I mean, he had a pretty good draft pedigree and everything like that. I mean,
I
don't know.
I think the thing that I look at is that when you have Tom Brady as your quarterback, he's going to want a veteran he can trust.
Yep. That's true.
Cameron Brate a few years ago, before Gronk and before OJ Howard, he was the 9th overall tight end that season with Jameis Winston. I feel like Brate, he's 31. He's certainly not a young chicken, but when he's played, like he had 2 games in week 16 and 17 when Gronk was hurt, he earned a clutch game, and he filled in, and I think he may have caught a touchdown in both games. Brady is going to go to a guy like that, especially early in the season when Godwin isn't playing.
Yeah.
And now you've got Evans and Russell Gage and, whoever else, Tyler Johnson, whatever person they got. I think the Brait will be looked at highly, and it could be one of those, hey, you get Brait, you start him first 6 games, and then, trade him off to somebody before they realize that Gronk will be back in week 10. Because it'll be
that's actually
right.
God, I wouldn't doubt it. But I also think that's something to think about too, and how to use consistency in a sense where it's like, maybe you can strike and trade away assets before they become inconsistent, looking at things like that. And again, to kind of bring it all back and kind of bring it to a head in a way, in consistency in Dynasty is a tricky one because a lot of it comes down to, timing, which we always talk about. I know I bring it to a head on every podcast. Like, timing is everything when it comes to trades. You don't want to just trade to trade, but if there's a reason to make a trade now, do it now. If you can wait, why make it now?
Right.
And that's one of those things. Week 6, if you're seeing Brait stomping and getting a ton of points and all this, like, sell him. Go ahead. Even in Dynasty, sell him.
Yeah.
Because the chances of that continuing may be low. And then obviously you've got Godwin returning and all that. Like, there's a whole bunch of that. But I mean, even players like Gage, for instance, like I know Russell Gage is someone that's getting a little bit of hype lately, primarily because, it's Evans, Gage, and Brait. I mean, like he's the second receiver target, if you count Fournette even. But Brady's going to like somebody like Gage. He advocated for Gage to join the team, and Gage has been around. So I feel like he could be a guy while Godwin's out, much like Brait, that you want to, after 6 weeks, you want to get out on, right? And be like, hey, let's sell what we can and see what we get. Sure, there's maybe potential value left on the vine there, but man, sometimes that timing makes everything. And that's where consistency can really show you some of that. If he's consistent to start, maybe that doesn't continue. Look at the history, see if he's trending that way. Like you said.
Yeah, so I especially look at when there's players that are on that fence type, where I'm looking at, I look and say, they only had 50% consistency, but like I know a couple of years ago when I was looking at kind of the Seattle Seahawks, and what I was seeing was this running back, when he got at least 10 to 15 carries, he was very consistent and productive. I don't remember if it was Carson or Penny, but both of them, of course, now are injured messes. But it was like looking and saying, when they got the opportunity, they were very consistent. The problem is that they never got the opportunity this year. This player has moved on, so this person's got that opportunity. So there's that, so I try to dive into, it's not just calculating numbers and say, what's all numbers and here it is. I mean, I'm certainly looking deep into it to find those little niches or little nuances that may say, oh, well, like Mixon, Mixon's 4th in total points, but guess what? He scored 50% of them in 6 weeks. That's the nugget that I want people to realize before they jump on that, like that they're all over and in for Mixon, that, he's not really been a consistent player. And in that offense, which is a high power, throw the ball a lot, lots of good receivers and a great quarterback, we'll see what happens. But
we will see what happens. And I think that's a good place to kind of put a bow on it. I know I put something on the sheet before we do a Find Me a Trade. Is a segment that I like to call Find Bob a Trade. Bob, you mentioned that you might have some different dynasty discussions and different dynasty trades you wanted to bring to the table for us to help you with. I know that's something you and I talk about in DMs a lot.
Right.
So I thought maybe I'd give you a couple of minutes here. If you want to we can help find Bob a trade. It's a little bit different. We will do Find Me a Trade.
Bob found a trade. It was just a question of whether you guys liked it.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about Bob's trade. What was your trade?
I'm in this unique league called Dynasty Owner.
Oh, yeah.
If you haven't seen it out there, basically it's a dynasty league. But everything is based on the actual NFL contracts and dollars. So a player, if they're, getting signed to a big, 5-year deal at $40 million a year, then guess what? You're paying them $40 million and you have to keep them under the cap and blah, blah, blah. So I took over a team in an expert league, with a bunch of guys, from around the country, of course. Anyway, so the team I was given, pretty good team. It's got, Justin Herbert, and Stafford is their other quarterback, who now, of course, got to pay big money to. The good thing is some of the guys they've already started their season. So any of the contracts that get signed now won't be until 2023. So like I have Terry McLaurin, I have AJ Brown, Stafford, some of these guys, or I don't have AJ Brown. I didn't have AJ Brown. And so I was chatting with one of the guys in the league. His name's Joe Bartle. He's from RotoWire. And so he offered me Mac Jones, who is only $3 million a year for the next 3 years. and AJ Brown, who is cheap for this year, will go up next year for like DJ. Oh, and the second round pick in the rookie draft that was happening.
Right.
And then I gave him DJ Chark, which is like $10 million a year, which I didn't care, and Jarrett Patterson, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
For nothing.
And
pretty much,
then the second round pick, he gave me his third round pick, and then I had to give him my first next year in 2023. And I know 2023 has potential to have a good, but I'm always playing to win, so I expect mine to be a late round pick.
Amen to that.
I had already had my first round pick, and I took James Cook as my running back. So now I have Dalvin and James. So my running backs, I have Dalvin Cook and that. So anyway, so I did accept the trade. You guys seemed to like it. We said we were going to talk about it, but I thought our thing was last night, so I couldn't wait. I accepted the trade. So now I have Terry McLaurin, Devontae Smith, and AJ Brown now.
Yep.
And I also have another good receiver.
Forget the other guy you listed.
Crap.
Tony.
Kadarius Toney. Yeah, I got Tony. Ronald Jones is a running back, and you only start 2 receivers in a flex. So 2 running backs, 2 receivers in a flex. So basically, I'll probably start AJ Brown and McLaurin, or maybe Devontae and.
So to just to recap, and I think that this to help clarify for the listeners here. So if we take the salaries and things out of it, because not that that's not valuable, it is, but just to kind of keep it simple, it's Mac Jones, AJ Brown, and a third for a 23 first, DJ Chark, Jarrett Patterson, and a 22 second.
Right.
Like the 23 first is really the cream of the crop on that side. And I'm looking at that like, and is this super flex? I think you said it was, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
No,
Mac
actually,
Jones,
it's not.
Oh, okay.
But your bench. You get 25% of your bench's points added to your total.
Ooh, that's an interesting twist.
So you don't
quarterbacks on your bench are still good.
Starting team and a crappy bench because, I
like
Stafford's
that.
going to be on my bench most weeks because Herbert's going to start.
Sure.
Interesting. But then adding Mac Jones for those upside weeks, that could help your bench.
Right.
Well, even again, let's say it's not super flex, but it helps your bench scoring, which I really like that twist actually. Yeah. But so again, Mac Jones, AJ Brown, in theory, let's just throw the little pieces aside. It's Mac Jones and AJ Brown for a 23 first. I take AJ Brown and Mac Jones all day. Like that, to me, that's an easy trade. I think, again, the salaries with Chark being 10 million, that's an easy give up too. But I'm just saying, as much as we want that 23 first to be phenomenal, I'm kind of with you. It's later. And I think AJ Brown is worth at least 123 first. And you're getting on the max side too. That seemed like an easy one to me. What did you think, Scott?
Yeah, the roster flexibility that it gives you right now, especially with AJ Brown, he's not hurting you. So if the season doesn't go the way you think it's going to go, you could actually trade him.
Right.
You could just turn around and move him if you want to do something different. But otherwise, you already cleared that space essentially, or half of the space needed with moving Chark. So I like it. You got to look at it differently with those contracts.
It's definitely different than a traditional dynasty.
Yeah.
My thought is that, if the team by halfway through isn't doing well, I'll trade Stafford, who's going to have a $40 million contract the next year. McLaurin and AJ Brown will all have big contracts. I'll just dump them and and I probably can get a first draft pick back.
And something that we even mentioned in our DM group before we started the show tonight even was, you could trade Smith. You know what I mean? You don't have to start them both. You've got time to make some other moves here. That's the benefit of doing these kind of trades in the summer, is that you're kind of building your roster, but not really. You can just trade for value still. I think I don't really worry about rosters until August and who I'm going to start when and where, because it's I got time. I can still figure that out.
Right.
I don't worry about stacks. I don't worry about bye weeks. I'll figure all that out later. The only time I don't is obviously in leagues Scott Fishbowl, where there's no trading, or in leagues like best ball leagues, of course, or just leagues that aren't active. To be honest, if there's a league that I'm in that I just feel like nobody trades, and I'm well, I got to be careful because it can be tough to make a move. But overall, I really like that trade view. I thought that gives you a lot of points for this year, and we were talking about that at the top of the show. Titles over everything else, man. That trade helps you win a title. And you can always get that 23 first back. We say that all the time. I know 23 firsts are gold right now. But at some point, there will become a time, leading up to the draft, we think we know everything, but oops, there's only 7 really good players instead of 12. That those late firsts aren't worth as much. It happens every year, and we still are not this year. It's gonna be amazing. We don't know what's gonna happen. Come on.
Well, even when I was gonna have to give up my second, there were some guys that I liked. I'm like, man, I don't know if I want to do that because there's a couple guys that, like a Samir White and some people that I was like, man, I could get him in my second round. That'd be pretty cool. Well, the good thing was that since I waited so long, it got to my pick. Guess what? All the guys I wanted were all gone. And I'm like, you know what? I don't like any of these people left.
I hate and love when that happens.
Trade even easier.
Yeah.
If I'd have made it yesterday and some guys would have been there that I wanted, I'm like, oh, damn, I probably shouldn't have done that. But yeah,
but no,
like,
that's
okay, you can.
That's where, again, timing is everything. But timing is everything, right? Like if you had made that trade, 3 hours before, you'd be kind of kicking yourself and then feel okay. But when it comes down to that, you're like, oh, well, now it's a smash accept. Like the values are very different now.
Right.
Oh, no, I love when that happens. So I'm glad we could at least, maybe not live on the show, but help Bob find a trade. That was kind of our plan there. Right. And Bob, my DMs are always open. You can always reach out.
No, trust me, I will be using both of you guys as my except for, of course, our regular league.
Yeah, of course, not when we're in the league together. Yeah, but I always say this to everybody. Like my DMs are open all the time. I may not get back to you right away. I do sometimes for whatever reason. And maybe Bob, maybe you have the same. Maybe you have the same, Scott. There was one day last week. I think I got 7 DMs from random people in the same day, like in a row. And I'm just like, what happened? Like, where did my name get out to? Yeah, like some algorithm pushed me somewhere.
Some algorithm.
So that day was tricky for me because I liked it. I don't just give a quick answer. I try to look at which is the way I think it should be done. So then some of those took me a minute. But again, send me messages. I also got an Instagram message. I don't check those. I don't check my Instagram messages. There was one in there from March. I'm like, oh, I hope you made that trade because that was really good. He's like, no, I made the trade in 3 others. I'm like, good, you're doing great. But anyway, just wanted to kind of mention that and give you a chance. So let's pivot now into the actual Find Me a Trade.
Yes.
This trade tonight is submitted by our listener, Jeremy Hayes at Coach Hayes7 on Twitter. He is definitely, I would say, a longtime listener. I feel like he's been around for a while. I know he put this team in back in March or something, if I recall, May, somewhere in there. And I reached out to him finally and was like, hey, you're up, let's go. And he was very excited. So hopefully he's listening tonight and can give us some feedback. Maybe we'll see. But I want to bring up his team. Scott, if you want to read some of the settings while I get that pulled up, that would be great.
All righty. So
and I love his team name, Man U. Like that's just confidence. You know what I mean? Like that's just confidence. I love it.
Right.
Yeah, the D-baggery there, but hey, that's right. If you're not a mank, you're a wank. Something like that. So
something like that, yeah.
If you ain't first, you're last.
That's right.
Okay, so 12 team super flex. We're starting 11 here. We have a 40-man roster, so that's good. I love those 40-man rosters. Start 11, quarterback, 2 running back, 2 receiver, tight end, and then 4 flex and super flex. So it's really 2, 2, 2, 1. So that's that's pretty easy. It gives you a lot of flexibility there roster wise. You can many different builds. It is 4-point quarterback touchdown and -2, and then it 1.5 tight end premium. So pretty fairly standard scoring there.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty standard-ish league.
Yeah, it's little deeper though with the 40, which I like. So that's good.
Yes. And start 11, which I'm always a fan of start 11 or 12. You know what I mean? Like just the more starting
flex,
the better.
Like having that one less receiver, but then the extra flex too. So you got 4 flexes, right? Yeah, I mean that's you can go so many different directions. So I like that. So Jeremy says, I am definitely a top team in this league and really would only be interested in elite upgrades at running back or receiver because I'm stacked at quarterback and tight end. Probably would only really want to trade my 23 first if picks were involved, but prefer to keep those.
And I want to, I've got his team up and I want to run through this. This is one of the better teams that we've seen. I'm not afraid to say
amazing.
That. This team is locked and loaded.
It's amazing.
Nice job, Hayes.
Yeah, that's why
if I was in a dynasty league with this guy, I would just quit.
Well, so I don't know if you caught this, but I made sure to say he was a longtime listener so we could take some credit. That was pretty much the game.
That's
there.
right.
Clearly, he's been listening
about all of it.
So let's run through the team. Let's run through. So for those listening, his quarterbacks, and again, this is a dynasty 12-team league, so it's not like an 8-team league or anything like that.
Right.
He's got Tom Brady, Lamar Jackson, and Dak Prescott. I'll be honest, that's a stud team in dynasty or whatever. Like, and he's got Tyler Huntley behind that, which again, not a bad backup to have.
Right.
Running back, if we kind of start at the top, we got Najee Harris, James Conner, Travis Etienne, who I think could be something this year, Darrell Henderson, D'Ernest Johnson, Tyler Beatty, Abram Smith. Like it kind of falls off a cliff there. Raheem Mostert, I think, could actually be something in Miami here and there. Phillip Lindsay, some names you've heard of. Kyron Williams, Jeffrey Wilson. But again, after the top 3 of like Harris, Etienne, and Conner, it does get a little light. And if you're contending, that's where I want to be heaviest is running back. Receiver, again, the receiver group. My God,
Loaded.
I love it. Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown. Those three right there, I just feel confident every week. But then he's got Jerry Jeudy, Rondale Moore, Sky Moore, Kenny Galladay, Jarvis Landry, KJ Osborne, who I think is a sleeper this year. Quez Watkins, again, another sleeper this year. Denzel Mims, who's a name we think could be a sleeper, but is never going to be a sleeper. So it's just one of those things. Like, I just think his receiving group is great. Oh, but wait, and we get to the tight ends where I think it's his best position group, if you believe it. Travis Kelce, Kyle Pitts, George Kittle, Dalton Schultz on one team.
Yeah.
And this is a 1.5 tight end premium. Like, this team is stacked.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
Stacked. This team is stacked. So again, you could start all four of those tight ends and feel perfectly fine in 1.5 tight end premium. I love that. So in my opinion, again, he is correct. He is the top team. Looking at this league quickly, I was like, well, there's no one that even comes close, but that makes it tricky to find a trade, right? Like, as much as we love that, it's hard to find a trade when you're locked like that because you have to pay a tax. So I guess, why don't we start with yours, Bob? Let's kind of get yours out of the way and we can see what you think of that. And we'll go from there.
I got a trade for him.
Perfect.
So in the roster thing on the site, there's a team right beside him called Whiplash.
Yes.
I would give him AJ Brown for Rashad Bateman and Kadarius Toney.
Okay.
What's your thought process? I just want to hear where you're. I mean, I'm not hating on it at all. I'm just curious where you are first.
I just think that it's some youthful depth. AJ Brown is, a big star, and he's definitely very young. And I think if you can add wide receiver depth, because you're going to lose guys like Landry and some of those down the road. I looked at I think he needs more of an upgrade is that him?
It's him. He's in the chat. Good job, Jeremy.
I think he could use more depth at running back.
Yep.
But, that guy's team, Whiplash, has garbage at running back. So that's not even an option. But he's got some depth at wide receiver. But I'm thinking maybe if you dangle a guy like AJ Brown, who's super young, young but also very talented, and has the superstar potential, title, and if this guy can go, oh well, I want AJ Brown, and and Bateman is unproven, but now becomes the number one in Baltimore. Tony's unproven, but could become the number one in the Giants over the next couple of years. I think that helps his long term. And I think it's a fair trade. Again, I'm not a dynasty expert, so you guys might go, no, I would never take that trade in a million years. But that's where I'm going.
Well, I'll start, and I'll just say I don't think it's a bad trade, but I prefer the AJ Brown side myself. I think I can get more for AJ Brown, but I'm also admittedly lower on Bateman than most. Okay. I know there are people out there that think Bateman is Marquise Brown times 2, and like he's worth 2 firsts and like crazy evaluation. So again, I'm not saying you're wrong. It's just, for me, I prefer AJ Brown, even on a new offense, to Bateman moving into the wide receiver 1. I am also with you on Tony. I love his talent and potential and upside. So I think this is the kind of trade that Jeremy could make, because he has the starting roster to be able to sacrifice a little bit and to take some upside and youth for the future and to kind of, piggyback on that. But I prefer the AJ Brown side, but I don't hate it. Scott, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, so I love Bateman and I hate Tony, so that's
perfect trade then.
But I like this because you're trading in the name value of AJ Brown for 2 guys that both have the upside of maybe not quite AJ Brown, but next year we could look at this and just think it's silly, right? Both of those guys could be worth so much. Youth wise, I don't know that we're actually gaining that many years just because AJ Brown's still young, but just from a value standpoint, like when we get into my trade, it's going to make sense why I think this is viable. And it's just because it's more of like, we have an elite team. So you can now make moves to build a dynasty, right? Yep. Like, this is what we're playing for is, yes, we want championships, but how can we also capitalize on value? Does AJ Brown's value ever get higher?
I don't know.
It took a little bit of a hit. So maybe there is room for it to go back up. But honestly, it may never get higher than it is right now.
Right.
Because we don't know what's going to happen with Hurts and that offense and everything. And so maybe it holds for a while, again, because he's young and he's very talented. We know what he can do, but I'm always a fan of selling at or near peak value. I don't think you can go wrong in those cases. And
I think this is one of those trades where, again, as someone who is the dominant team, you can afford to pay the tax. Yes. Right. You can afford to lose the trade, quote unquote, and be like, hey, fine, I lost a little bit of value, but you're taking two most likely ascending assets for what could be one static or descending asset in AJ Brown. So I don't think it's a bad trade in that regard at all.
And Jeremy, if you don't necessarily like, if you love AJ Brown, you want to trade him, pick one of your other receivers, or look at another team and find two other receivers you think you could do this.
Or trade AJ Brown and get two running backs.
Apply the concept. Right. Yeah, apply the concept, not necessarily the players, right? And so I
guess that's what and that's how I looked at it too, was what is his most valuable asset that could go down, but he also could get some great long-term value for. And I'm like you guys, is I have a team like that. I just keep building that foundation stronger and stronger so that I'm just kicking ass the next 5 years.
Well, and so that's a perfect segue into Scott's trade. So Scott, why don't you tell us about yours? And it's the same kind of thought process. So why don't you do yours next?
Yeah. So I'm basically just saying that you're in the catbird seat, right? You can wait on the small moves until, I don't know if you have a trade deadline or, opportunities may arise. We don't know what's going to happen. It's June. Okay. You might lose a player for whatever reason here. We don't know what's going to happen. So there's no need to consolidate or do anything crazy right now. You don't need to swing for the fences because you're already over the fences. Like, you're already there. You just need to make sure you get to the finish line. So those small moves can be made later. So I thought, you know what, why don't we take somebody who's, yes, I'd love to have Brady for this season because he can get you across that finish line, but there's a lot of indicators that this will be his last year. And, I know people have been saying that for a while, but it really seems like this is going to be his last year. Even if he's got 2 more years, if you trade Brady to team TaylorMade for Deshaun Watson, I'm not sure he takes that trade. He was kind of I was looking for another team maybe that it fit better, but I felt like because of the Watson situation right now, and again, Jeremy, if you don't like Watson and you don't want him on your team, I totally get it. Yep. But what I'm looking at is in 2 years from now, Brady's probably not going to have any value if he's even,
well, that's a descending that's a descending value player, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so whereas Watson could be, solidified again as a top 5 quarterback, and then you're going to have Watson, Dak, and Lamar, right? So again, this is about building the dynasty. It's not so much about right now. And so it just depends on how comfortable you are with moves like that.
Does that team have the potential to do well?
So that's what I wanted to talk about. So I wanted to Brady. So I wanted to bring this up because I like the thought process and I like the thinking you're at with this. The only issue that I had was this team is good, but I don't know if Brady really helps. Let's assume, and this is where it becomes speculative all the way. Let's assume Watson misses 6 games or the whole season or something. I don't know if this team really misses him, if TaylorMade really misses him. He's starting Kyler Murray and Derek Carr as his top 2. Mm-hmm. Watson could be a second. He could be ahead of Carr, but maybe not for this year. Like, there is some talk that maybe he's not that much better. I mean, I don't know. I'm with what Scott said. Like, I don't know if he would do this, but I would have no problem adding to the Brady side to get it done. And that's where I was going to go. I wouldn't mind adding like Rondale Moore, add like a young receiver, somebody with upside to close the deal. Because I think value-wise, Watson significantly many greater signs than Brady in value, but in consistency, to bring it back, Deshaun Watson is the most inconsistent, the most all over the map. Nobody knows what we're getting with him, right? Like, it's there's so much risk with that guy, and it's like, for a team that's ready to win, that's a great piece to add because you're not going to miss him on your team. Jeremy's not going to mind putting him on the bench. It's really not going to be a big deal. But what I'm saying is this other team, TaylorMade, he has Jonathan Taylor as his top running back. David Montgomery is his RB2, and then kind of nothing. Naheem Hines, I guess, is his third. For receiver, he's got Mike Evans, Garrett Wilson, who I think could be somebody. I think he's really good. Treylon Burks, who could be really good. He's got David Bell, who could be really good. Like, he's got a lot of question marks at receiver.
A lot of things would have to go right.
So he
Yeah,
has
just
no
doesn't-
veterans after Evans?
No, and it makes me worried that he's
he
not.
has Allen
I'm not sure.
Robinson. He has Cam Akers. He has Logan Thomas. I mean, he has.
I'm not
guys
seeing
that
these
we've
guys. No,
seen
I'm not seeing these
productive
guys.
years on it.
He doesn't have Allen Robinson. Are you talking
What are
about?
you
Oh yeah,
talking
yeah.
about?
Injured reserve. My bad. Injured
Yeah,
reserve.
Cam Akers,
You're
Allen
right.
Robinson,
You're right.
Logan Thomas. I mean, he's got guys that could come in if Thomas,
Okay.
comes back healthy that second half of the season.
Fair.
Allen
I missed. You're right. I missed the injured reserve. I didn't scroll down.
Cam Akers could come back, but there's
Point's
question
still
marks
the
with all
same.
these guys.
Point's still the same. Yeah. Like I just don't know if his team is really feeling like he's one piece away. And I also don't think he's one quarterback away. But I don't mind this as a basic thought process for a trade.
Some
skeleton.
guys just want out on Watson right now, too.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Well, especially with the news coming
Ask
out
Andrew,
and like
he trade him to me.
Well, exactly. And well, just for a hot second, let's talk about that trade. Cause I think it's it was made a month ago now. Like this is, this is not current in a sense. This trade.
And I'm not angry. I still like the trade.
It was made June 7th, right? It was almost a month ago. I have it written here. So I sent to Bob Deshaun Watson and I got back a 23 first, Daniel Jones and Kenny Golladay. Now, I remember this trade was one of those that I was like, God, but Watson is definitely worth more than a first. And Daniel Jones is like all over the map. And I'm like, but I just kind of went out on Watson. Like I'm willing to take the value dip, but then at the same time, Watson's a risky player. And in that league right now, I feel like I have a chance to go for it. I'm like, I don't think I can afford to lose more value. So I got out. Right. But I do think it was a pretty fair trade then. And I do think it's still a pretty fair trade now.
Right. And what, again, Scott may not know is I have Tom Brady and Josh Allen in his Superflex.
So you can take that.
He was making
I don't
this kind
care
of
if
trade.
Watson plays at all this year.
Absolutely.
And that's why I wanted to bring it up here as opposed to earlier, because this is exactly the kind of trade that you made, Bob. This is moving from a win now. You're giving up a 23 first, but we were talking about that before. Like that could be Deshaun Watson, right? It could be a boat. Like why not just get Deshaun Watson? And then Daniel Jones and Kenny Golladay, the stack that no one wants. You know what I mean? Like nobody likes those two guys. Like Daniel Jones has the shortest leash and Kenny Golladay is one ankle away from bagging groceries. So like both of those guys are kind of like trash-ish. And I was like, you know what? I went out. I'll take it. But I could see everybody arguing both sides of that trade. And it's exactly what you're talking about.
I got a lot of shit for like, why would you take that on? He's going to be suspended for the whole year. I don't care.
Exactly. And that's exactly what it is. Like the roster build matters everything. And that's exactly why I wanted to bring it up here, because this is the kind of trade that Scott was bringing up.
Right.
Neither team really in this trade needs Deshaun Watson this year. Neither one. Right. But you could look at this and say, well, you could look at that and say Ready Made could use Tom Brady and put him over the edge. And like that puts him as a solid QB3 and all this. So I think it's a very good trade start. I will say that. But again, Deshaun Watson is such a lightning rod. It's tough to find valuation on that guy for sure. So with that, I want to get into mine and we'll kind of wrap up here. Mine was in a similar vein. I love that all of us were kind of talking about breaking up or trading down or moving around. Mine was his biggest strength is tight end. I think you got to trade tight end. My first trade that I put on here was something like Dalton Schultz for Derrick Henry. I don't know if that gets done. So I was like, well, let me go up a little because I think Schultz is getting a lot of hype and Henry is getting a lot of hate. So I feel like there is maybe a chance that could pull off. D. Tyler is the team with this one. And D. Tyler has, for quarterback, he has Matt Ryan and Jameis Winston. For tight end, he has Evan Ingram, Cade Otton, nothing. You know what I mean? Like this team is just in a middle ground hell. No receivers really to speak of. But he's got Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry, Ezekiel Elliott at running back, like this, and Kenneth Walker. It's like he's got one of those teams that's like upside down. You know what I mean? Like if I don't have any, like I just don't like any of his receivers. He's got Chris Olave, Gabriel Davis, like just those upside players. He has too many running backs for a team like that. So if I was that guy, I'd be willing to move any of those running backs for somebody more steady. And I felt like Kittle for Henry was too light, so I was going to do Kittle for Henry and Michael Thomas because again, I think Michael Thomas is one of those guys that could be something. This guy's also got Juju Smith-Schuster. So he's not like dead at receiver. I misspoke a little there, but like his receivers are weak. And I feel like if you send Kittle there, you get back Henry, who is a stud, I think, still for this year and helps you push to the title a little more than Kittle does as your second or third tight end, depending on how you rank Kelsey. But what do you think about that one, Bob? Am I on the right track there?
Yeah, I mean, I love Kittle, but Kittle can't stay healthy. Yep. Jeremy wants Watson.
Yeah, I just want to put that on there.
Yeah. Again, I love Kittle as a player. He's very, he's fun to watch, but God, he's like Chris Carson. He's just a train wreck when it comes to running the football, and you're going to get hurt. And, I want a guy that's consistently scoring, but I also want him to be consistently on the field. And, I don't care if you're 80% consistent, you miss half the games. It doesn't help me. So, again, if it's a trade to me, I'm going to be like, I don't want Kittle, but, I'll take Schultz, or I'll take, so I think Schultz is a good one because I think it's, again, is it a 1-year wonder? I don't think so. Is he going to be as good as he was this past year? Boy, that's pretty tough. I mean, he was more consistent than Kelsey. So, so again, this might be the peak. I mean, going back to Scott's thing, this could be the peak of Dalton Schultz. And again, he may still be a solid tight end down the road, but we might have seen his peak. So let's trade him. And if you can get Derrick Henry for a couple of years, again, you're not going to get him for a long time. Then or maybe even get an Alvin Kamara, because that guy might go, look, I can't risk those 5 or 6 games. He could be suspended, and he can.
Right.
So yeah, something like that. I think I think the concept makes sense. It's just a question of which tight end and which running back each is going to want to give or take.
And that's where you can talk to the D Tyler manager, and just say, hey, which do you prefer? And kind of offer both options in a DM or something, and just say, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Here's 2 options. Which one intrigues you more? Right? Like, are you looking to add Dalton Schultz, or are you looking to add Kittle and maybe pay a little more to do that? Like, there's no wrong answer, and you can kind of talk that out.
Or you get nuts, and I don't think it's a dumb idea. You throw out Kelsey and get more.
Yeah.
I mean, again, you've got 3 stud tight ends outside of Kelsey. Kelsey's what, 34? He's up there.
He's not young. Yeah.
It's
so that's where
it's going to be a couple years. So again, this could be his peak. Do we offer up Kelsey and get Kamara and something,
or you can maybe go for like a bunch of, go to 3 pieces, go to like 3 pieces for Kittle or Kelsey, kind of break it up even further. But I think the way that this team is set up, Jeremy, it's going to be hard to consolidate any further. I usually say when you're going for a title,
upgrade anywhere. Well, I don't think you can upgrade.
I would say if you're going for a title, I like to consolidate my assets and put all of my points on my lineup and not on my bench, right? Like that's what I think. That's when I try to move more toward the studs, right? It's tough when you've got them all. Like, when you've already got all the studs, where do you go from there? Like,
how do you upgrade a tight end?
Well, I was gonna say you could maybe make it like a trade, like Kelsey plus AJ Brown for like Justin Jefferson and something else. Like you could do crazy, but I don't know if there's a lot, man. And I think Scott, you actually put this on the sheet, and you said it briefly, but you can wait until the trade deadline. You don't really have to make a move right now. You could kind of keep some things in your back pocket. You could start talking to some different managers and say, here's where I'm thinking, where are you at, and kind of see how the season goes.
Wait for opportunities, like other team, maybe not just your team, but other teams. Like maybe there's a team that thinks they might be contending this year, and then some things don't go their way the first 4 weeks, and now all of a sudden you can get a piece, real cheap, or you can, maneuver around a little bit. And so that's you just always have to be diligent looking for those opportunities.
Or just throw out guys in trade bait. Just put Kelsey out there, see what you get. Put Kittle, put Schultz, put AJ Brown, see what, because you never know. You might get, I've certainly been in leagues where, I just put players out there and then I get a trade that I literally have to like rub my eyes like, is this guy serious? What he's giving me? Okay.
Yeah.
You would never embarrass yourself by asking that trade, but God forbid you're going to turn it down, right?
I'll definitely accept it.
And people are like, I can't believe you accepted that. That's terrible. No, it's terrible for them, but it's not my problem.
Well, again, though, everybody values players differently. So I always say there's no right or wrong. It's not like there's no such thing as a bad trade or a bad offer. We all value players differently, and that's fine, because if we all agreed, it'd be really annoying. Trading would be impossible if we all agreed. Exactly. So it's kind of nice that we don't. Right. But I think overall, Jeremy, I think we gave you a pretty good idea of where we're at with this. I think you've got all of us on your side saying, this is going to be, I think this is going to be your year if things go.
You're not allowed in our league. Right. I'm just going to tell you right now.
Yeah, I'm glad you're not in my league, man.
Jeremy's not allowed in any of our leagues.
Man, this guy's good. But no, definitely let us know how it goes, Jeremy. Send us a DM or something. We'll bring it up on a future episode. But I would love to see if you get any of these done. But in all honesty, you could make 0 moves for the next 8 months and still win the title, and that would be worth it to me. You don't have to make a trade, but I get it. I love trading. You're listening to Junkies. You're listening to the Addicts. You know what I mean? Like we're all kind of itching and jonesing. So I totally get it. So I guess with that, let's kind of bring it to an end. We've gone an hour and a half, of course. That's just what we do here. But again, Bob, make sure people know where they can find you, where they can find your work, and where they can buy your guide, of course. course, and just kind of get
Everything.
the last bit of where we can get you.
A lot to talk about here. So let's start with Twitter. So at Bob_Lung. Also, if you want to follow the Expo, Twitter is at the FF Expo. The Expo website to buy tickets and come visit us all in Canton, Ohio, August 12th through the 14th is the fantasyfootballexpo.com. Then the book, you can find that on Amazon. Just type in 2022. You can put fantasy football consistency, but honestly, if you just type in 2022 consistency, it's the only thing that pops up. So check that out. Get the guide. Then you can get the code that's in the book, and you can subscribe to the whole website, get all the tools we talked about tonight, all the historical consistency data and that for only $10 for the whole season. So can't beat that.
Worth it.
So check everything out. And Scott and Andrew, thank you so much for having me on. I had a great time. Thank you for helping me in my other Dynasty leagues. And
anytime for you, Bob. Come on.
We'll see what we can do and see if I can start becoming a new Dynasty expert.
I like it. Well, for those of us the junkies that do this all the time, we love talking about it. So yeah, we're always open. If you want to shoot something by us, I think it's very rare that I get something in my inbox and I'm like, I don't want to talk about that. No, it's like, please distract me from my work. You know what I mean? Like, I am happy to talk. Don't tell my wife. But no, it's just like, I love talking about this. So I guess with that, obviously follow us on Twitter at Dynasty Junkies. Follow us on the DAP Network at DAP_Network. Definitely subscribe to us on YouTube. I know that that's something that kind of goes unnoticed, but I know the DAP Network goes live on our show, and you can Get Real and a bunch of other Timeline. Of course, they were great last night. I got to listen to that because they brought up the picking live in our Junkies League, so that'll be fun. I got to listen to that. But definitely keep us posted on what you come up with there, Jeremy. But definitely follow us all too. And I'm just going to go to the two of us. I'm at Andrew Hall FF. We've got Scott Sidlow at Scott_Sidlow. If you go to our Twitter profiles or even the Junkies profile, you can find our link to find me a trade if you want to submit your team. Definitely subscribe, rate, and review on all the podcast sites. We love reviews. Definitely submit more of those. If there's something you want to see more of or less of, or less Rocky, you're getting that. That's terrific. We're all happy about that. We can just blame him because he's not here. But definitely do all those things and keep interacting with us. Post us or tag us in trade polls and all that stuff. But with that, again, consistency in Dynasty. What a fun topic. But with that, I'll give it to you, Scott, to take us out of here tonight.
All right. Thanks to all the homies in the chat. As always, we appreciate you stopping in even a little bit early tonight. Hey, we maneuver around here and there, so we appreciate you doing the same. Thanks to Jeremy Hayes for the FMAT submission. Keep those coming in. Thank you so much to the OG Bob Lung for being here tonight. So for Bob, for Andrew, for Rocky, and for Bobby, of course.
Great. Forgot Bobby.
Greek Bobby. Look at these guys traveling. What are we doing? Anyway, suckers. I'm Scott Sidlow, and Junkies out.